Okay, so the recording has started, and I just want to say a warm welcome to everyone on the call. This is going to be an overview of Data Cloud. So for everybody, for the familiar faces and the new one, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We're going to go ahead and get kicked off. So Mehmet, if you'd progress the slide deck a little bit. Yeah, I just wanted to start with a quick thank you. A thank you to all of our attendees. We had a very successful meeting in person at Salesforce Tower last week. I'm really looking forward to this evening, and we had a lot of folks register for this event. So I want to say thank you for all of your interest. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for you to ask questions. And so I hope you'll engage. I hope you'll engage with the presenters. Okay, if you want to progress the deck, there is some background noise on the call. I think pretty much everyone is muted, but if you're not muted, if you just mute yourself for the moment, I'd appreciate that. Yeah, just a couple of meet logistics. We are recording this session, okay? So just want to make everybody aware of that. We love to have cameras on. So if you decide to have your webcam on, that's great. Just be mindful of how you're dressed and your surroundings. You all know this by now. Microphones, you are muted by default, but there will be opportunity at the host's discretion. So if you're putting in your questions, and when we come to that that moment later on, we might ask you to unmute and give you the power to do that, to elaborate on your questions. Until that point in time, we really encourage everyone to use the chat. So as we're going through all of the content, use the chat, engage with the presenters, ask your questions. We're going to be moderating and pulling out those questions and putting them to your presenters as this progresses. So Mehmet, if you would continue on in the deck there. Just have a couple of pre-flight notes for those of you that maybe don't know the Dublin admin group, myself or my co-lead Kieran. So my name is Jürgen Stratmann. I am an instructor, a certified Salesforce instructor and tech lead at Blue Wave, which is a UK and I Summit partner. I've also been the CGL, that is community group leader for the Dublin administrator group for a number of years. My colleague and co-lead is Kieran Fitzgerald, who's also on the call, the founder and practice lead at Haddington Solutions, and he has been helping instrumentally with the Dublin admin group for a while as well. So feel free to reach out to us. I hope you'll engage with us in the future. And with that, if you'll progress to the next slide, the best way that you can engage with our group for anyone who's not already a member of our group is just to go to Trailhead, and underneath the Community and Connect section, you have groups. Just make sure to toggle to all groups and type in the word Dublin. Will be the very first one that comes up, and you can punch that little plus sign to join our group. There's a few reasons you join our group, but the number one reason is because you can ask follow-up questions about content just like this. You'll normally see decks made available, recordings made available, and other kinds of announcements. So if you want the quickest way to get there, you can use that QR code. So we'll leave that QR code up just for a second. Yep. And, sometimes I've found that folks that are already attending our sessions for a number of years weren't actually group members. They didn't know these groups existed. So it's always good to put this up. All right. So we'll progress to the next slide. Thank you. And just one thing to be aware of with our group, we have another virtual event just like this one coming up in 2 weeks. So on July 3rd, our own local community member, Leanne Ardley, she is going to be talking all about CPQ, and particularly some new and exciting things for CPQ in 2024. And one of the other new products, and in a comparison between them, which is RLM, or Revenue Lifecycle Management. We're getting a lot of questions about that. So it's a good time to revisit an important topic and product for Salesforce, which is CPQ. So if you're interested in learning more about CPQ, if you're going to take a CPQ certification exam, or you're just looking for a refresher, everybody can benefit from that, then you can register for that event at the QR code on screen, or by just going to our Dublin admin events page. Okay, so want to call out our community host. This is a very special event because we are co-hosting this event with 2 other community groups. This is rare enough and really kind of a cool opportunity. This is really a global event. So I will let our co-leaders introduce themselves, and I'll start with JB. So JB, if you want to just jump in and introduce yourself to everybody.
Hi, everyone. And firstly, thanks. And I'm so honored to be here doing a co-hosting event with you all. So I like all that you're doing for the community. And to give a brief about myself, I'm a marketing cloud consultant, marketing champion, Salesforce MVP, and the Golden Hoodie recipient. So I was the founder and the co-leader of the Phoenix Marketers Group, and this year it was all dedicated to the data cloud sessions. So earlier on, we have done a 12-day certification bootcamp for the data cloud, and the data cloud deep dive series is going on, and parallelly hands-on sessions are also going on. So in any questions regarding marketing cloud or data cloud, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I use the same credentials on LinkedIn as well, Jyotsna Pitra. So I'll be reachable there. Happy to connect. Thank you, Jorgen.
Fantastic. Well, we have a few more resources you might be interested to discuss. So if we just want to progress to the next slide, Mehmet. And I'll actually let you go through this if you want, JB.
Yeah, thanks, Jorgen. So these are the upcoming events. So we have already finished the 12-day Data Cloud Consultant Certification Bootcamp. And now we're almost at the end of the Data Cloud Deep Dive series. We have done 9 sessions so far. And the hands-on sessions are in progress. So you can see a list of all the sessions on the Phoenix user group, the Salesforce Marketer Group Phoenix. So you can find the upcoming sessions over here. The hands-on sessions are something which are unique in such a way that one of the attendee will get a chance to log in to have access to the demo org, and one will be the lead from our team. So one of us will be leading and one builder, the attendee, will be driving. So they will be doing everything in the demo org. So it's like show and tell and then hands-on kind of session, which is very easy to understand. You can actually, even if you don't have access, you can actually feel how it's going to work internally. So these are something which I would recommend for someone who do not have access, and for someone who are beginning with the data cloud. So you can find all these upcoming sessions, and for the previous sessions as well, the recordings are all available at the YouTube channel MC Learning Camp. So I'm not sure if the recordings link will be accessible or not, but I repeat again, the YouTube channel is at the rate MC Learning Camp with no spaces in there. You can also search on the Trailblazing Together YouTube channel.
To plug in for JB sessions, because I had a chance to attend some of them. Trainings are great. Trainings can also be academic because you're going through exercises. And this session that we're about to start, the sessions I've watched in JB's, especially the last few, are often done by practitioners that have gone through the journey. So at the beginning, you hear the fundamentals, you hear the concepts. Because in this session, we are not going to talk about what data cloud is. We are going to talk about how to implement it and how not to implement it. So I think these are great resources to be mindful of. In that regard, my name is Mehmet Orun. I'm one of the co-founders and co-leaders of the Data Matters global virtual community. Our goal is to cover data-related topics across roles and across product lines, because data governance, data quality, data integration are all common topics, whether you're implementing Tableau, MuleSoft, Data Cloud, Salesforce Connect, or various topics. We do have 2 other sessions coming up that may be of relevance, especially to the admin community here, and we always open our sessions for co-hosting. Next week on June 28th, it is not EMEA friendly, but if you're SVP, you'll get the recording first. We are going to lead a session with Salesforce's internal head of AI innovation, who is quite hands-on, that's going to talk about fundamental ways of thinking about AI. None of the sessions tend to be marketing related. And then if you like the way I present, I'm going to talk about best practices for not only AI-ready Salesforce data, CRM data quality centricity. Then on July 31st, we are going to host the Salesforce operations team for the 3rd part of our series, where they're going to talk about how Salesforce manages its CRM org's data, which is one of the oldest and most complicated orgs ever implemented in the platform. Their tools, their techniques. If you're curious about what else they have covered, how to think about data governance, how to think about process, org chart funding, you can see the prior sessions either on our YouTube channel or our community as well. With that, We are excited to welcome you to the session, a Data Cloud Proof of Concept case study. What did we learn in 3 weeks while achieving business value and having tangible learnings? Angelica, would you like to kick us off with your intro as well?
Sure. Well, my name is Angelica. I am located in Montevideo, Uruguay. I am CTO and co-founder of Modality, the SI consulting partner. And I am also Salesforce MVP, 15 years of experience in the ecosystem. And I am very, very happy to be here with you talking about Data Cloud and how we were able to do an actual Data Cloud implementation in less than 3 weeks. About this slide right here, if you attend Salesforce events, I am pretty sure you've seen this in the past. This is the way that Salesforce has to tell us that we have to make any purchase decision based on features that are currently available and not something that is part of the roadmap or it's in beta.
And since this was a proof of concept, everything we used has been with available features, and if not, we will talk about it. Thank you again for being here. We look forward to your questions. A little disclaimer, we do not know everything. We are good at making mistakes like every human being. We are also open about the mistakes we made, and as community leaders, as practitioners, we want to share with you what we learned from our actual POC project. Our goal is to share what we did, so you don't make the same mistakes we did. We want to share what we applied that was a good practice, even if it was not documented originally. And if you have other ideas, if you are confused, if you want to challenge it, please pause them as part of this call. That is how we all get better together. So we want to start the session by talking about how we got here. Now, for introductions, I am the GM and data strategist for PeerNova, which is a 10-year-old software company that originally created business data reliability solutions that sold to banks, nothing to do with Salesforce. I am a Salesforce alumni with 18 years in the ecosystem. I was with Salesforce for over 10 years. If you're ever curious how person accounts came to be, why the person's name is Sam in Customer 360 slides or other trivia I may have answers, let me know. But the reason the role is specific is a little over 18 months ago, we kicked off our Salesforce ISV program. And before we get to the technical aspects, I want to take a moment to share with you why businesses make certain decisions that lead to certain architectural outcomes, including technical debt or data that we may need to resolve, and put this in the context of why we ended up doing a Data Cloud POC. September 2022 is when Data Cloud was announced at Dreamforce. And based on the interactions, based on my knowledge of the platform, based on the Q&A with the product leadership, we decided we could offer value in the Salesforce ecosystem around data reliability. So we kicked off our program. In March 23, we became an official Salesforce ISV partner. We launched our first product in June. That was a free product. We launched our first paid product in December. And in April, we launched our second paid product as well as our SI partner program. This is kind of the business view. What this meant from an architectural perspective is when we decided to invest in this business decision, we have no product, we have no customers, so we have no business applications. As a company, we historically used, the decision was made years before I joined, HubSpot, Zendesk, among others, no Salesforce stack whatsoever. If you're familiar with the Salesforce ISV program, if you're an ISV, you end up using Salesforce technologies. So in March, when we became a partner, we got our 2 free licenses, which enabled us to start using it for packaging. And when we launched our customer advisory board, we were tracking our engagement with them in HubSpot. Why? Because we didn't invest in broader licenses yet. We already had HubSpot configured. It made the most business sense. When we launched our first product in June, remember I said it's a free product. Free products mean there are no opportunities, but a product means there are cases. So as an ISV, we were tracking installations in our PBO org, Partner Business Org. We were tracking our support cases in Service Cloud, and we were tracking leads and email engagements in HubSpot. When you first launch, you don't get a lot of leads, you don't get a lot of installs, right? So there is no felt pain yet at this point. But as we launched our first paid product, now we want to know who's attending a webinar that is then installing the product. We want to start tracking opportunities. It's like the water starts boiling a little bit, the temperature is getting warmer. By the time we were approaching April, the tracking we needed to do between what are we doing in HubSpot, what are we doing in Sales and Service Cloud was becoming less practical for what we wanted to achieve in the business. We wanted to know who was interested in what, so we can more effectively engage them as leads. We wanted to have a consolidated understanding of our business contacts. And we also decided that what we should do was go from HubSpot to Salesforce Account Engagement for our marketing efforts, essentially consolidating the information. And we have 12 months of data that is in different places. And what makes it even more interesting is when you work with a consultancy, and I believe a number of your consultants, you have a work email, you have a personal email, at least one, and then you have a client email when you're evaluating something. So we needed to know who are we talking to across the identities to optimize our relationship. So our business objectives as a company is how do we know who are we talking to, how many unique individuals, unique companies we are engaged with, while simplifying and consolidating our business application stack in a compliant way so we can also do segmentation properly. Our journey is always being mindful of our investments. We make license decisions, implementation decisions based on what's going to make sense, and we want to apply the same thing. The reason Data Cloud made sense to us is as an enterprise edition customer, we knew we had free credits. We knew the identity resolution capability and the differences between Salesforce CRM versus Data Cloud. It just made business sense. If you have questions on it, we can dive into details. So we scoped our project. Angelica is also representing our SI partner in this case. So we decided to do the project together. We have a business goal and we have a technical goal. Our business goal, as I discussed with our CFO, is being able to communicate accurately our business relationship in the first year of our journey with individuals and companies. The technical scope was how can we effectively integrate the data in our Salesforce stack for the Salesforce line of business, priority number one, with a softer priority to show if we decided to simplify the entire business application architecture, because our primary or original line of business still uses HubSpot and Zendesk, how difficult would this be for us? Are there technologies? Is there a secure path to unify that data as well? In order to do this, we needed to define our scope between a proof of technology, proof of concept, and a proof of value. If you're not familiar with these terminologies, for me, the distinction is incredibly important. As a customer, as a buyer, I am not inclined to pay for almost any proof of technology because it's the job of the pre-sales engineer to prove to me their technology works if they want me to buy something. Exceptions are if we are trying to tie two different things together. A proof of concept is interesting for a business stakeholder because it shows that a problem is viable to solve to deliver business value. The challenge is proof of concepts do not quantify the business value that can be achieved because it's dealing with a sample set of just a few records. I personally believe, especially if you're evaluating new technologies, the best way to show business value, technical viability, and gain the confidence of your investor, your CFO, is through proof of value projects that show what can we achieve if we solve this problem, and then we calculate the cost and we plan the technical implementation project based on the learnings. So what we did was for HubSpot CRM integration, we did a proof of technology. Angelica is going to get into why we chose this path as opposed to MuleSoft. And we focused the business angle on the business relationship consolidation in a scalable way. Before we go further, are there any questions on these so far?
No questions in the chat. Yeah, I'm watching the chat, but I'll just say I find that on my engagements, I almost always have to pause to talk about the distinction between a technical and a value feasibility. So I'm really happy that you called that out up front.
So let's continue then. So let's talk about the scope. If you have attended sessions at Salesforce events, live or virtual, you're hearing the conversation turning more and more into define your use case first, and technology is taking a later and later role in the process. I would say that the best way to look at this is map your customer journey, look at who you want to engage, at what point, identify their information needs, how it needs to be pulled together, which then drives your technology decision. The way we looked at our initial scope was we are going to limit our project to Salesforce CRM and HubSpot. Now, the best practice for planning any proof of concept is 1 is too few for Data Cloud because your data is already in one database. 4 is too many. 2 or 3 is the sweet spot because 2 shows you the benefit of consolidating information. 3 helps you determine if you have an exponential difficulty or not. So we chose to focus on 2 sources and 3 to 5 source objects for similar reasons. For us, we looked at account context, leads, and campaigns because we are seeking to assess our engagement with different organizations or individuals. Of course, in Salesforce CRM, you have the benefit of roll-up fields where we can see the underlying transaction counts as an indicator. In HubSpot, we didn't actually use campaigns internally for whatever historical reason. We use tags. So we had the need to reconcile tags versus campaigns as well, but our focus was companies and contacts. Our functional scope was extending our relationship with companies and business contacts, which sounds simple, but this is one of the aspects that if you're just following Trailhead or help and training, Salesforce does not tell you when to choose what. You have lots of options. Do you use individual, or do you use accounts, contacts, and leads, or do you use accounts and contacts, or do you use accounts and leads, and what does an account represent? We'll probably do a deeper dive just on this data modeling alone. There's a Salesforce architect we're also collaborating with to publish a pattern that is almost like a choose your own adventure book for this, but we ended up focusing on account and individual because we are relatively early in this line of business. We want to understand if we are talking to, Jorgen as a CGL or an employee or something else. We just want to start with that first and then detail it later. The account level of detail was a lot simpler for us because we have a business-to-business model. The additional building locations is less important. We tend to roll everything up to a global or a regional headquartered, so that was fairly straightforward. For our technical scope, we needed to decide whether we were going to use standard connectors or when we were going to use custom connectors. Angelica is going to get into the details of this. We also needed to make sure the underlying data model needed to be as correct as we can make it be, because if you mess up your data model, it's one of the most expensive mistakes, not just from a time perspective, but credit consumption perspective. Also, if your data model is not right, your information likely will be incorrect. Reputation risk alone is something that takes much more time to recover from. We'll get into both of these as part of the details in our presentation. In terms of the plan, these are accurate hours. So we had a part-time team of 4 for our POC. I played a dual role, both being the sponsor project manager and a data analyst. Angelica was the end-to-end architect and developer. We had our CRM admin that spent about 8 hours configuring everything, permission sets, etc. And Sebastian put together some visualization so we can analyze data effectively. We engaged with our CFO, who's head of corporate functions. He's the ultimate approver. That's about 2 hours total. Navid is both a HubSpot business owner and head of corporate marketing. We needed to demonstrate that there was not going to be any security compliance breach in any way we did things. We put in place strong controls. And of course, Rene, our HubSpot administrator, to make sure what we agree to can be set up and then maintained in a secure way with permissions turned on and off at the end of the project. This is our actual project plan. I aggregated everything we tracked in Jira for your benefit. Week 0 always takes more than 1 week because you get buy-in, you schedule meetings, you figure out who's going to be available when. But we agreed on we should do this project, what would be the scope. We agreed on what we did not know that we would find out. And we went through the paperwork for Salesforce to provision us the license. In week 1, our CRM admin turned on Data Cloud and set up permission sets in a few hours. We installed a data profiling solution from AppExchange. Angelica is going to talk about what and why. We profiled the data content in order to determine our scope that was relevant. And we started the HubSpot development. In week 2, the connector development was finalized using the Ingestion API for HubSpot. We profiled HubSpot data in week 2 now that the data was landed. And by comparing HubSpot data to Salesforce CRM data, we made the right data modeling decisions in order to do the necessary cleansing, standardization, transformation that allowed us to finish the mapping, do identity resolution, and focus on quantifying results and putting together a presentation package. Because of the tight focus and scope, we were able to achieve all of this in 3 weeks, which then said, now that we know the quantification, what would we want to do next? I'm sure there will be a future presentation on that in a few more months when we iterate on the next phase of our roadmap. With that, I want to turn it over to Angelica. Everything starts with effective planning and scoping. The floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So the first thing that we have to do is to think what data are we going to bring into Data Cloud. One thing that we want to be sure is that we were like for the proof of concept leveraging the free credits that Salesforce gave us. So well, it gives to anyone. So that was very important. So the first, natural reaction is okay. Let's analyze the source data sources and also objects, and let's start creating a data dictionary using spreadsheets where pretty much we're going to be listing for each data source, in this case Salesforce CRM and HubSpot. Okay, let's identify all the data source objects and go field by field, listing them, analyzing things like the field type, the length, if it's important or if it's driven any type of value that we should consider to make the decision if we want to bring that into Data Cloud. So it seems pretty easy to do. However, the problem is that source objects may have hundreds of fields. So a quick math exercise is that the source objects we wanted to bring in total had almost 900 fields. So if we were to spend 1 minute analyzing each field, we were going to spend 900 minutes building these data dictionaries. So then we said, okay, hold on, maybe we have to do this in a different way. And that is what we end up doing. That's the reason why. This is showing you how many fields each source had. And that was the reason why we thought that we had to find an alternative. Next slide, please, Mehmet.
And I think, Angelica, we had a relatively simple architecture. We only had 200-300 fields per object, as opposed to 500-700 fields per object. That can be common.
So what we decided to do, okay, let's go a step backwards, and before start digging into each field, let's understand the data that we were going to use. That's the reason why we decided to use a profiling tool to understand our data. What's a profiling tool? It's pretty much a tool that will analyze the data you have in your data source. In this case, we were using a profiling tool for Salesforce. So we profiled the CRM data, and we got insights like field distribution rate, completion rate, and that led us, to define or get information that help us making the decision on what pieces of information / data points we wanted to bring into Data Cloud. Why is that? Because that let us confirm that we will stay within the free credits. That also accelerated the Data Cloud design scoping phase, and it let us take advantage of the metadata concept in Salesforce, because we were able to extend the profiling tool that we use to clearly identify what fields were going to be part of the scope of the project.
To make a side remark, for those of you on the call not familiar with the Data Cloud's credit consumption model, you essentially consume credits based on the type of task you're performing. If you're querying 1 million records, it's 2 credits. If you're doing a batch data transform of 1 million records, it's 2,000 credits. It's performing matching or identity resolution on 1 million records, it's 100,000 credits. And conceptually, the more resource intensive it is, the more compute resources it's going to take. So that is the basis behind it. So making sure that we understood how many credits we may consume for the most important task, which is most expensive task, which is identity resolution, was pretty important to us as an organization. So when you look at how many fields there are that may be used in matching how well populated they are, this is directly proportionate to your potential credit consumption and risk exposure.
Yeah, and also on top of that, remember that you are deciding what data you want to bring in the Data Cloud, because then you want to act on that data. So it's super important to concentrate on the things that will add value or will enable you to make those type of decisions. You don't want to end up with, information that is not used, that is going to add noise on top of increasing your credit consumption. So, okay, you install the profiling tool, so then what? Then you need to start defining the metrics or the insights you want to calculate to then be able to act on that information. So for us, it was okay, let's analyze the completion rate. Completion rate is how many records have that specific field populated. So we defined that we were going to concentrate on any field with a completion rate over 30%. Okay? And that is a decision that we made based on previous experiences. But for you, maybe you want to concentrate on the 70%. So that is up to you and based on your business needs. We were profiling in Salesforce, but because of the nature and how we are going to be, how data has been historically used, we decided that the information that we were getting from profiling the data in Salesforce, then we could extend that to our external data sources. So we profile in Salesforce, but the lessons that we learned by doing that, we then extended that to HubSpot in this case.
One of the other details to add is, depending on what solution you're using, you may be limited to just analyzing things in Salesforce CRM. If you have external tools, which we would not have allowed export of our data to an external database without extensive security reviews, how do you gather these statistics? We will provide resources to the AppExchange Data Cloud connection at the end by having a data profiling solution that can either profile Salesforce CRM objects or Data Cloud objects. You have the ability to monitor data with the least amount of credit consumption, where you can still compare the results.
Mm-hmm. So, and this is an interesting one. Sometimes we, as humans, have the reaction. I mean, the way that we react when we see a field that is 100% populated is like, oh, this is an important one. But maybe it's not the case because there are many reasons that can explain 100% completion rate. Fields with a default value, IDs that, I don't know, like the equivalent to the last modified date, maybe it's not something that we want to capture here. So the 100% population or completion rate might be an insight that you want to say, okay, this is important, but also, think about all the other situations where you do not want to bring 100% field. Okay, not only think about the value, also consider it the field if a field ever has only one value, consider it unreliable, because that is the case for default values. I mean, I think we've all run into situations where we have, a very old running org where we have required fields that at some point they become like not important, and instead of just removing it because of the complexity of deleting a required field, we just leave them using a default value, okay, a 1 or a character or value or something. So pay attention to those details, okay? You can get some bias, and then again, you can end up importing things that you don't really need. Okay, once we got all the insights, we remove the fields that we consider to be irrelevant for the scope of the POC, and we concentrated on smaller subsets of what we decided was going to driven value for our project. So things you can do is, okay, you can filter by completion rate, you can filter by this field distribution rates. Also, you can filter by field types in for our proof of concept, because we were going to provide contact lead information, and as Mehmet said earlier before, some of those individuals may have like different type of emails. Bringing in data with a type of email was relevant for our use case to then be able to do the identity resolution based on that information. We wanted to track profiles, I mean, social media profiles, LinkedIn profiles, etc. So also bringing in information of type URL was meaningful for us. So those are the things that you need to start figuring out. With the information that I have about the field type, the source field types, how can I create insights that will support, my decision making on what to bring into Data Cloud?
Like if you zoom out and think about the fundamental data operations you're conducting in Data Cloud to unify data, you either have data for profiles, information about your customers, suppliers, etc., or you have engagement data, which is about transactions. If it's about profiles, you're going to apply identity resolution. So looking at data types that are populated or well enough populated is going to be important. Looking at distinct rate is going to be important because there may be external identifiers hidden in your data, especially in external data sets that may not be well documented. So looking at a combination of, fields are populated greater than 30% and data type is email or phone number or URL, by being able to combine this type of pieces, you can very quickly focus on the scope that you're looking for.
Yeah, and another one that it's important about data types, as Salesforce professionals, we are used to having 20 different field types available, but sometimes in your when you're working with external data sources, all your fields are classified with less options, like an email, a text number. It can be just text instead of having specific field types. So that is something to consider when you're going to be interesting data into Data Cloud, because you might end up having to do some data transformation just for the field type. So then you can map them correctly in Data Cloud, and also to be able for you to do the assessment on what fields or data points you want to bring in. Mehmet, do you want to take care of this slide?
Sure. So one of the things to be mindful of is just because you have data in a database as an organization does not mean you may have the rights to have that data everywhere else. I don't know if there are any marketers on the call or not. Marketers commonly use enrichment data sources, depending on the nature of that legal agreement. That enrichment data may be limited to a business unit, it may be limited to a business application, it may be permissible for the enterprise. So one of the things that was also important for us is when we identify data that was relevant to our business, evaluate it to make sure that we can use that data outside of the business application it originated in. In this case, we use Cognizant in HubSpot, and we needed to look at what is the nature of our contract? Can data we enriched in HubSpot be used in other business applications as well? Looking at acceptable use policy for enrichment sources is an absolute need to do anytime you're conducting a data unification project, regardless of technology.
All right. Data profiling app that we decided to use, it's available on the App Exchange. Because of that, we were able to extend it beyond the functionalities it includes to help us again, identifying what fields should be part of our project without using a spreadsheet. So based on the insights that we were able to calculate, we could define some rules to say, okay, this field should be part of the scope or not. Okay. That is the beauty of Salesforce, and I mean, any application can be extended. So we were able to do that to avoid having to create an external spreadsheet to again track the data dictionary and use that to decide what was going to be part of the project scope. So the standard starting point, we had 5 data, source objects with more than 900 fields. And then at the end of the day, we were able to keep the same 5 data sources, but we were working with 150 fields. Okay, so look how efficient we were in terms of reducing the scope, ensuring more focus, ensuring to be capturing data that was going to give us business value, and also to keep in the boundaries of the free credits. So now let's talk about the data ingestion. So when we're getting into the execution of a data cloud project, one of the first things that we need to consider is, now we know what data sources we're going to be bringing in, the data objects and the fields. Perfect. But what is the mechanism to ingest the data into the data cloud? The first thing that we need to consider is there a standard connector available for that data source type? If the answer is yes, let's use that. Why? Because we are going to be saving tons of time and effort, and Salesforce has already tested for us that the standard connector works, so we are going to minimize any type of things. However, there might be situations where we need to interact with a specific data source that does not have a standard data cloud connector. That is the case of HubSpot. So when we run into that situation, we have 2 options to go there. The first one is to assess if the customer we're working with has any MuleSoft licenses available. If that's the case, then we can leverage the MuleSoft power to connect to the data source, assuming that data source will have REST APIs available that can be connected. If that's the case, let's use MuleSoft, okay? However, if the customer does not have MuleSoft licenses, and because of time, budget, you name it, any type of reason, MuleSoft is not an option, then we need to work on building a custom connector using the Ingestion API. That was the case for this proof of concept. We didn't have a MuleSoft license because we wanted to move fast, and because it was a POC, we decided not to go or take the path of getting MuleSoft licenses. So When it comes to the Ingestion API, it's very powerful, but there are like more things that we need to think about. Okay, what do we want to achieve with the project? Is it going to be a one-time ingestion because we are working on, doing an initial data load, because we want to assess how our data reacts when stored in data cloud, and we want to iterate to improve the final design? If it's a one-time thing that we're going to ingestion that we're going to be doing, we need to use the bulk approach. Okay, however, if we want to keep monitoring, updates to the data sources that we're going to be connecting, and based on those updates we want to push them or ingest them into data cloud, then we need to use the streaming approach. Okay, because of the nature of the project, this was a one-time ingestion, so we did not use the streaming approach.
Look, I want to add one more detail, and recognizing this is the admin community. Not every default option is always the right option. We're going to talk about other examples also. Salesforce, of course, provides an out-of-the-box connector for Salesforce CRM into Data Cloud. However, as an admin, you know what is configured in your org, you know the security mindset, especially if you have a private org-wide default security setting. That implies that you may have data in your org not everyone is allowed to see. Data Cloud does offer a capability called data spaces where you can further segment the data. However, that assumes that Data Cloud users, Data Cloud developers are going to be allowed to see some of the data you're protecting tightly in your Salesforce CRM. So if you have data that should not leave your CRM org, or leave it only under tightly controlled circumstances, you may also need to use the same custom connector path. An easy example I give on this is, let's say that as a company, you not only have customer support cases, but you decided to extend Salesforce CRM for HR cases. You're using a private setting, your human resources department uses their specific record type, your customer support team uses a specific record type, everyone can get their job done. If HR cases should never be in Data Cloud, don't use the standard connector. Does that example make sense? I do believe that the roadmap through the streaming API is going to allow filtering in the future. Ask your Salesforce product manager or account rep on roadmap questions, but in the meantime, this is your current path.
Yeah, and so this is when, as an architect, we need to be creative, because sometimes it's okay, I do not have a standard connector for this data source, but maybe in my company we are using S3 to store information. So is there a way that we can export data in my data source and upload that into S3? Because for S3, then there are standard connectors. So there are a decision like this is not black and white. There are many intermediate steps that you have to ponder to decide whether that is the right move for you or not. So some considerations when you want to use, the Ingestion API. The first thing is the data source has to be accessible by a REST API. If that is not the case, then it's when you need to start thinking, how can I export this and put it somewhere where I can access it over REST API. You need to analyze the endpoints to ensure it provides the operations you need. Because sometimes it's oh yeah, I don't know, this big or very commonly used data source, of course it will have bulk methods to export the data and provide with filtering conditions. That might not be the case. So never assume. Think about any API rate limitations, especially if you want to be monitoring updates to your data source to then send them back to Data Cloud. Because if you have some limitations in terms of the number of callouts that you can perform on a short period of time on that data source, then you will end up having issues. And maybe that means that you cannot go with a streaming API connector. You have to work with the bulk one, because maybe you will have to do or run nightly shops to ingest your data into Data Cloud, moving from an almost near real-time experience into a daily basis updates. Okay. Also, when you're working with a custom connector, of course, you need to write code to implement the custom connector. And I know that this might sound like super evident, but when you are working in your environment, you need to ensure that it's secure because you're going to be working with data. Okay. So when you're working with data, you need to be extra careful because you need to think about, am I going to be working on a local machine? Is that local machine encrypted? Are we using a VPN? Who is going to be connecting to data source? Encryption, security, all the things become even more relevant because you're going to be working with real data. When we were getting into this, I remember having many conversations with the head of marketing because he wanted to be 100% sure that we were going to have all these security, reliability things in place before giving us access to their data. And we didn't have access to production first. We were working with a test account just to minimize any potential risk. And then, last but not less important, always design your solution, thinking about the less privileged permission. If we're going to be working with an external data source, it's super easy to ask, give me access to everything, read, edit, delete mode. That is not how you want to do things. You need to have access only to the things you need to read, okay? That is going to protect you, it's going to protect your customer, and that is how you should be thinking about this. Of course, it's more complicated because you are learning about different type of access on the go, then you have to request, submit a request, get the approval, get the access. But that is much better, to exposing or having a vulnerability risk materialized and then trying to fix that.
So there is one interesting thing about this, of course, that is almost chicken and the egg. You want to have access to least data, but when you're working with source data, you may not know what you need. So what we did in our environment is, so the good news is we have already reviewed and decided Salesforce security meets our requirements as a company. Everyone on this call is a Salesforce customer and or partner, so this may sound obvious, but not every data source in an enterprise meets the same standards. So when we were asked, can we tell our HubSpot administrators specifically what fields we need, we couldn't do that without seeing not just the field names, but also the field content. So the agreement we had was as part of the project, and I would say that this is a best practice that goes all the way back to data warehousing days. Start with production data in your secure Salesforce environment to profile, so you can then apply the principles Angelica went over and determine these are the fields we need. Perhaps these are the filtering criteria you may choose to apply as part of your production integration flow. But if you do not look at the data, if you do not look at the production data, you are not going to have effective design for context, for consistency, even for compliance. And as you filter this, you can build the logic in your integration flow, or you can build that logic into your downstream transformation flow, depending on the security posture. Does that make sense? If not, please ask questions on this because this is incredibly important. One of the biggest reasons projects like this fail is because people were not given access to real production data. They try to work with synthetic data that did not represent production complexity. And when you go live, lots of expectations get missed.
Yeah.
Angela?
Yeah, and also keep these considerations in mind. It's very easy for us to say, oh, I've been working with so many data sources or been doing integrations for years, and then we run into these issues. We run into this. We had issues with HubSpot not giving us the endpoints we thought they were going to give us. We have had issues like, okay, we cannot see all the data, then what do we do? So we run into this. So don't minimize the impact of these considerations in your planning phases. Source schemas. That was also a very interesting one. Analyze them. Things that happened to us. Again, we were so used to having like 20 different field types available in Salesforce that somehow we assumed that external data sources were going to have the same. However, when working with HubSpot, we identified that field types were categorized like with a generic category, like everything was a text field, sorry. So we had to then do some data transformation to be able to identify this is an email field, and that is how we want to map it when ingesting the data in Data Cloud. So also we run into issues where field names in HubSpot were too long for the API names that we can use in Data Cloud. So again, we had to put some data transformations in between to be able to map, okay, this field in Data Cloud is going to be called in this way. Then we have identity normalization, filtering things, and also doing some transformation needs prior ingestion. Why filtering? Because we didn't want to bring in all the records, maybe just a subset to reflect, I don't know, information coming from a specific marketing campaign, or to use while testing. I mean, one of the things that we did was to, okay, let's define, what records are going to be part of our testing process. We didn't want to test with everything. Why? Because of credit consumption. So we had to sit down and identify subsets of information and how we were going to filter them. Not only to visualize them in HubSpot itself, HubSpot has like really nice filtering tools, but in the context of the Ingestion API, okay? And that was a tricky one. So analyze this, okay? And again, don't oversee this aspect because they seem so, so simple, but at the end of the day, when you have to get hands-on practice on finding a workaround to troubleshoot this, is not as easy as it seems. More things about the Ingestion API connector. When you are creating an Ingestion API connector, one of the first things that you have to do is to upload a YAML file that is pretty much a descriptor of the structure of the source objects that you're going to be ingesting into Data Cloud. There are like different tools available to actually read the schema of your database and then produce the YAML file. We didn't have any issues, but again, I don't know why, but it's a concept that sometimes scares people. Oh, I have to export my schema and transform that into YAML file. Again, there are libraries, you can use it. Authenticating, the code, that was an interesting one. We ended up using connected apps, but when you're working with Data Cloud, it's not only about authenticating to the org, but then getting the token to authenticate in Data Cloud. You have two patterns, streaming versus bulk. We already talked about the differences. For the piece of proof of concept, we use the bulk approach. And when working with bulk, if you go through the implementation details, you're going to see that it sounds very much like the bulk API, the traditional one that we use to manage large data volumes in Salesforce. So pretty much what happens when you're building a connector of this type is that you have to create CSV files to then push them into Data Cloud. Those CSV files have pretty much the same limitations as the ones you use when using the bulk API in terms of the number of records they can contain, the columns, and etc. So if you're going to get into, a project of this nature, take a look at all the limitations of the bulk API because you might run into the same things here. For the timeline, the first thing was to get the stakeholder approval, okay? Then do a security review meeting. Pretty much you need to work with your customer and explain them the process that you're going to use to provision access to the data sources, how you're going to manage your local workspaces, and also in the cloud, if you move everything into a cloud-based architecture, how are you going to communicate, when, access to data sources have to be terminated, etc. Then you need to get access to data sources. Again, less privileged permission. Provision all the different development accounts. Set up when possible, because there are some data sources that might not have a test account available, perhaps, but we were able to get one. We also were able to use an org, not the production one, to use it during the testing phase. So you do your due diligences to provisioning the things you need for the dev environment. And then it's when you start working on the development of the proxy application. That is how we call it. Pretty much you write the code to, address two main use cases. First, connect to the external data source, export the data, then do all the data transformation that you need to then create the bulk shows and push them to Data Cloud. Then about testing. Testing is an interesting one because you need to prove that everything works, but also you don't want to be manipulating real production data. So first, we work with a test HubSpot account once, and we used data to ensure that the flow was working fine. We were able to authenticate, export, transform, connect to Data Cloud, and then to ingest the data. And once we were happy with that, we move into, we did another round of testing, but in this time we were accessing data, working with the subsets that we agreed to, just to ensure that everything was working fine. When we got that approval, we moved to production. We deployed to production, and again, we used a subset of data just for the initial test to again ensure that everything was working fine in the real environment. Then we proceed to do a stakeholder notification, letting them know when the ingestion was going to happen. We sent a reminder of the data that we were going to ingest into Data Cloud. Once we get the green light, not the green light because they were notified that we were going to do that, but okay, your deployment window works for us, we proceed to do the data ingestion, going into full mode, okay, this is all the data we need for the purpose of the project, and let's ingest that into Data Cloud. As you've noticed here, communication with stakeholder is very important, and we were very intentional with keeping them up to date with all the different phases and activities that we were performing, and we over communicated, sending or getting a stakeholder notification and approval on the deployment window. Okay, they were already notified that we were going to do that. Still, we did it again. Is this time going to work for you? Because we were super cautious. Okay, this is a perfect example where we were more communication because of the importance of working with customer data.
Okay, we have about 20 minutes left. We want to leave room for Q&A. We hope what you're getting from this is we're covering a lot of details, and we still did all of this in 3 weeks. One of the key messages I'm hoping you're taking away from this is while data unification can be difficult because you're dealing with different applications, different technology stacks, different schemas, different data content, different rules. It is possible to do this quickly, especially when you have an integrated platform that brings much of the capability under a single technology umbrella, which Salesforce Data Cloud does. And when you have the right methodology, you can go a lot faster, especially when you're using native platform tools, whether it is reports, whether it's apps, etc. Let's spend a few minutes on data design and data modeling. To bring together information in a consistent way is incredibly important. While Salesforce Data Cloud includes data kits to make mapping easier. One of the things you need to be mindful of is when to and when not to use these. What you may notice here is in the default mapping, which was originally introduced 3 years ago to support the Marketing Cloud integration use case. Contact ID is what maps to contact point phone ID. Every admin on this call knows there is more than one phone number field in your Salesforce CRM object. And if you want to track these attributes distinctly, contact ID would not be the right primary key or right surrogate key for a contact point phone ID. So the way we approach this is, we analyze our sources to see how many contact point fields are actually being used. Side note, we discovered our marketing team had actually introduced a custom field, which was the one that was used for mobile phone versus the standard field. But we were quickly able to determine we do actively use 2 phone number fields, we actively use 2 email fields, and we primarily use 1 LinkedIn profile field as URL. What this led us to is determine the need to create an alternate ID. We use the Data Cloud formula fields feature, just like in Salesforce CRM, and we use the consistent naming convention to include the field name followed by the primary key of that object. So in this case, it may be email-contact ID or personal email-contact ID. We were able to create these at DLO level as a way to control it in a single source of truth instead of in transformations. This means these IDs are available for every downstream transformation. And as we did this, we now had design decisions to make. Do we map the new formula fields that represent a more effective primary key to our data model object? DMOs are virtual objects. They don't persist the data. They in fact instead query the data from DLOs. Or do we create an interim DLO as the basis of our mappings? If you are mapping your source DLO to the target DMO, you can bypass the interim DLO step and still maintain the right primary key. However, if you need to do any standardization, if you need to do any scrubbing, if you need to do any transformation, this is not going to be sufficient. Now, why may you need to create an interim DLO? One reason, because you want to maintain additional business context. In this case, if I'm mapping my email field for my source object to contact point email, I may want to say this is the business email as opposed to the personal email. This is the primary one. This is not the primary one. If all I'm doing is mapping my source DLO to DMO, I'm not going to be able to specify these additional details. That has to be part of your data transformation logic. Just to show you the other example, we had the personal field. One needed to be business, the other needed to be personal. Business needed to be primary, personal was not going to be primary. If we decided to do the interim DLO, both to maintain data richness and to also do additional standardization. I remember I said at the beginning, we also made mistakes. Someone laughed about it in the chat. One of the things we did was we read the description of the fields and originally created a schema expecting for business use to be Boolean. You have a lot of the CRM administrative habits. What we realized is in DMOs, even though some of these fields say indicator, the standard data type was text. So we then needed to change our interim DLO data types so they can map one-to-one to the DMO data types. So as you're creating interim DLOs, be mindful of your target structure because they're going to need to have parity. I hope that example makes sense. The other reason, by the way, we wanted to put in place interim DLOs was not just to maintain contextual details, but to have additional level of control. We've been talking for a while. Let's make this a little interactive. Please type in the meeting chat your favorite invalid email address you've seen in your org. No thanks at gmail.com. I haven't seen that one. That's great. Test@test.com. I've seen that a lot. Anything at fake mail, customer at bank. Awesome. Okay, so if you have fake emails, fake phone numbers in your database, and you do an identity resolution or a matching rule with it, you're going to have false matches. Some data sources you can clean at the source. Salesforce CRM is a good example of it, which is why you should always start by profiling your source data. Other data sources, this could be Commerce Cloud, may be essentially or practically immutable, that you are not able to change the source data, which means you're going to want to introduce data consistency and data cleansing as part of your transformation logic, where you have to address it, and identity resolution is one of those steps. So what we did was, as part of our data transformation logic, we also allowed a place that as we discovered different details we may need to standardize or scrub, we knew that we would be able to do this here. Ultimately, our path was to go from source DLO to interim DLO, where we maintain consistency and context for our target DMO. If you want to read more about this, the guidance on this was recently published on Salesforce Pen, and it should also be added to Data Cloud Resources section in a couple of weeks. Now that we talked about data modeling a little bit, as well as the need for data cleansing, let's talk about data standardization. Let's do one more quick chat exercise. Can people type what country they are in at the moment? I love these exercises. Okay, so for those of you that are in US, USA, or United States, are you in the same country? And how would a system know unless it has standardization and mapping? So one of the advantages of data profiling is it gives you statistics of value frequencies within and across DLOs, as well as Salesforce CRM sources. Now, we are like many or any other country. We have a standard in Salesforce CRM, and we had a different standard in HubSpot. Why? You may have mergers and acquisitions, you have different administrators, things evolve over time. So we needed to understand what standards were being used in different settings. We discovered that both for country and for the marketing use case for UTM source, we had different field names that had the same value, or same or similar field names that had different values. By analyzing value frequency, this allowed us to determine our data standard decisions for our organizations in Data Cloud without having to change the underlying data sources. And we were able to incorporate data standardization into our Data Cloud data transformation logic. How did we approach it? Well, you can either look at which values show up most often across sources. So if 5 sources used the 3-character ISO code, 1 used the 2-character, 3 used the short name in the example of country, you can choose to say most applications win, or you can look at value frequency. Those are the 2 common patterns that are in place. As we went through this exercise, we now have a well-defined data model informed by understanding of our source data content. We have transformed the data where it made sense so it is consistent. We have applied data scrubbing to eliminate predictable bad values. Now it is time to do identity resolution configuration. For individuals, we decided to go with fuzzy first name, exact last name, and exact email. And we also used exact social handle, pardon the typo, because we wanted to understand unified understanding of the individual. So if it was the personal email versus work email, but they the same LinkedIn ID, that was success for phase 1. If you want to do business contacts, you probably need to be a lot more careful on this because you're going to need the business domain. If you're dealing with a consumer space, this pattern will probably hold true for you. For accounts, we were not using something like Dance Right in our algorithms. It was not necessary for the space we are in, but if you're a B2B organization, data enrichment providers are great. So we used account name and exact website as a way to do this. We also looked at email domain, scrubbing out personal email domains for our lead-driven matching that may not be account records yet in our Salesforce CRM. What this allowed us to do is give us a sense of how many unique individuals and unique companies we were dealing with, as opposed to distinct contact lead or HubSpot contact records or various account records. If we were doing this, just to highlight this other item, we needed to be mindful of correct mappings. So always refer to help and training guidance for the minimum mappings you need to have. Make sure that if you're mapping that you're going to refresh the data, refresh the metadata because not everything may be alive. I realize I'm fast forwarding a little bit to have enough room for questions. And at the end of the day, we knew that we had a little over 30% overlapping records. I'm just gonna go to the final step for this. If you have any questions on this, we are going to provide our email address, LinkedIn profiles at the end of the session. The biggest thing for me as the customer was the ability to go back to my CFO and say, look, we did this in 3 weeks as promised. Actually, we said we will do it in 4 weeks externally. Our internal goal was 3 weeks, which we achieved. That allowed us to get credibility that this is a viable technology solution, that we knew the methodology, the way we planned, the way we executed the partnership model also worked. But it had to start with business value. And because we looked at an effective sampling strategy, we could say, look, based on what we did, here is how much more insights we can achieve through unification. This is foundational for us to better engage our customers. And because we were able to tackle real data inconsistency challenges, real data scrubbing challenges quickly, we also demonstrated the technical viability in a predictable delivery model. So where are we now? We still have free credits. We did not use up all of it because we were careful in what we chose. What we want to do next is, now that we understand what we can unify at the heart of our solution, we can now talk about what other interactions we can bring in. I am frankly very interested in our activity history, our engagement history, our email history as part of the new LLM model that's part of Data Cloud in order to better guide customer-facing teams. More on that in the future as well. Just so you know, as of 19th of June, you cannot see your credit consumption. You need to request it from your AE, but sometime middle of July, according to Salesforce, digital wallet will be rolled out to customers, so you can see what exactly you have consumed. That's going to make this a lot easier. As we go through these things, a few other nuggets to share with you is differentiate your proof of concept versus proof of technology. Always look at additional resources in the ecosystem. Sessions like what JB is hosting, Trailblazer community sessions, Salesforce Ben, in addition to Data Cloud resources page. And Salesforce doesn't highlight this near as often as I think they should. There is a Data Cloud collection page on App Exchange that includes activation vendors, enrichment vendors, data management vendors, and these are going to allow you to go faster in a secure way more than the other alternatives. Always be mindful of that. With that, here is our contact information, both work and Trailblazer community. And with the remaining time, would love to take any more live questions.
Well, thanks so much, guys. I've been monitoring the chat. I also noticed that my camera's a bit on the fritz, so it says it's on, but it looks like it's off. So anyway, I'm still here. Lucas, if you're still with us, I see you've tried to elaborate. So I'm just going to read this out. Guys, Lucas is asking if we could just go a little bit deeper on the topic of single source of truth. So what he's saying is he'd love to know how we could stream data from Salesforce to the back end for their business. So for example, that would be an address update, which might or which must be reflected in the back end, basically keeping data in sync wherever it's changed. So could we maybe just elaborate on how that works in Data Cloud for folks who aren't so familiar?
So I'll start with the philosophy around it, that a single source of truth means you know where to get the latest information, but that doesn't mean you update the information everywhere, because some records are transactional in nature and they should stay transactional as snapshots in time. Without knowing, Lucas, your industry, if this was a consumer use case, a retail use case, we are never going to update contact point records and historical orders. And you probably do not want to update records that was entered by a customers themselves in a self-service model, but you may choose to update a contact records for Service Cloud so the latest information is available. The idea of an update does not need to be a pushed update either, however, because once you unify data in Data Cloud, whether you're using zero copy and referencing data from another data lake, or you consolidate the data in Data Cloud objects themselves, you have the capability to reference that data in your CRM org as well without further replicating it. So you're only acting on information when it becomes relevant. So you can be deliberate in, are you going to use flow to trigger an update because you know that information has to be updated in a given target, or you can choose to make that data available at a virtual layer so people can see what is latest and they can choose to use what is latest in their transactional context. Does that help?
If you could just respond in the chat, Lucas. I think that was a really nice answer, Mehmet. And I've just put in the chat as well that it's important for folks to remember what Data Cloud is not. Yeah, Lucas is saying thank you for the answer. It helps. Fantastic. Great, Lucas. Thank you for that question. Does anyone have any other questions for our presenters?
So I saw a few more. I thought, Jorgen, you asked a question. Oh, Angelica responded to you.
Yeah, I'm happy to restate that. And Angelica, if you want to maybe just restate your answer in case anyone else finds that helpful. We do have to be mindful of credit consumption. And so when you were mentioning that move to production, I was just clarifying how you might have planned for or communicated to the client about that potential duplication. And I think you answered the question really well. So I'll just let you answer it.
You're on mute, Angelica.
I'm sorry. I mean, it's still happening after like 4 years of just virtual meetings. So it depends on how you're planning your testing strategy. If you are going to be performing a test to run on a subset of data just to validate that the ingestion works, and then you work with incremental ingestion works. First, you can go with your test subset of data, and then you can do the rest. In that case, you're not going to be consuming credits twice. However, if you just want to do a test just to test a few things, and then you're going to do a full ingestion that includes not only, that will include your test, your subset, plus the rest of the data, then yes, you may end up having like some duplications in terms of credit consumption. Which approach works for you? It will depend on how well you can scope your test subset, or the intent of the testing. For us, it was enough to run the subset and then rerun everything because of the volume of data. That was not going to cause an impact in terms of credit consumption.
One other thing we talk about is, so random sampling may be good for unit testing, but when you want to do design and especially a proof of value project, you need what I would refer to as a deliberate sample. So if you want to stay within the free credits because you haven't committed to Data Cloud yet as your solution, you want to be able to run identity resolution twice at a minimum. So that means you want to not have more than, let's say, 300,000 records that's going to go through that logic. If you have 5 million source records across your 2 or 3 sources, you're going to need to find the right deep set that is going to be reflective. This may be for one product, this may be for one geographic region, that could be based on postal code, it could be based on whatever criteria. And once you define your deliberate sample for your proof of value, then you take a smaller slice of it for your testing strategy. So you prove it's going to work before you run it through the larger logic. Let's see. Do we have any other questions that was answered in text that may be useful to answer out loud?
Well, Richard's kind of asked a clarifying question, and this is interesting. So maybe I'll elevate it to you all. So I was just reminding folks that kind of by the letter, let's say officially, the communication from Salesforce is that Data Cloud is really not purpose-built as a data cleansing tool, a golden record system, data governance, backup, or recovery tool, or BI tool. Now, having said that, and Richard's kind of poked the bear here, ideally a customer would still probably want to complement Data Cloud with data cleansing tools. I think the answer is officially yes, absolutely. But you did show us a kind of an interesting way to supplement your data cleansing tools before ingestion with additional DLOs that can help in the normalization process using formulas and things. So that was pretty cool. I actually hadn't seen the use case of DLO like that before. But yeah, do you want to add anything, Angelica, Mehmet?
So what I would add is, because there were 2 parts to your question, Richard. One is, do you need to complement the Data Cloud product with other capabilities? I'm paraphrasing on purpose. And then you asked about Alteryx explicitly. Look, I just pasted an article. You have 3 classes of solutions for data management in the ecosystem, both for Salesforce CRM or Data Cloud. You have 100% native tools that work as part of the platform. You have third-party tools that work completely outside, and you have hybrid ones that does data processing and storage outside with secure connection in and out. Alteryx falls in that third category. Just like in Salesforce CRM, where you can do data profiling, duplicate management, enrichment is an extension of the platform, you can do the same thing with Data Cloud. And this is why the Data Cloud collection on AppExchange is really important to know about. The reason I strongly recommend for native solutions as opposed to third-party solutions is when you use an external tool, and these are written in the Architect's Guide article, you're going to need to deal with security review and approvals. It is going to be a heavier lift, and typical users of IT-centric data management tools is IT. The people that is responsible for data management, data cleansing, data quality improvement typically tends to be teams within business that needs to see these results. So if you're curious about it, I know the number of data management solutions for Data Cloud is still fairly limited at this time. The product Angelica referred to is a native data profiling tool that works with Salesforce CRM and Data Cloud. I expect there will be more and more of these solutions. There are data enrichment providers for Data Cloud, many more of them, because that started earlier in Salesforce's lifecycle. And that is my, broad enough answer to both sides of your questions, I hope. And then Jorgen, if I can plug in a session, both Derek Ellis and there was somebody else that repeated it recently, is Data Cloud is not a master data management solution. And professionally, the idea of a golden record MDM promise failed. It was an interesting idea. We now have almost 20 years worth of experience in it not meeting the broad contextual needs of the business. A Data Cloud takes a key ring versus golden record approach. There's a session Derek Ellis from Salesforce gave on this topic. If people are interested, we should definitely invite him to one of these sessions so they can repeat it.
Yeah, I would love that. That sounds great. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, then I want to do thank yous in order. So there are 30 people that were still on the phone call. And so if you're beginning work or you're ending work or you're in the middle of your workday, thank you so much for attending this session. We do hope you found it valuable. And we are happy that you engage with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And to our presenters, thank you for sharing your expertise and your knowledge with us. That was an excellent session. I really appreciated the fine details, which are missing from documentation, of course. So that's the real world stuff. And I think probably a major reason people attended. This was recorded, so it will be available on, I think, all of our group pages or links to it anyway afterwards. So folks can feel free to watch it back and share it with their colleagues. So thank you, everybody. And with that, we'll start wrap up. Yeah, I just don't want to close it too early because everybody's saying thank you, and that's so nice.
Please stay in touch, reach out, share your stories.
Where will the recording be, Josh? The recording will be on our event web pages. So the same place where you went to sign up after the event, you'll be able to see the recording there. So if you just go right back to where you had originally RSVP'd, the recording will appear there this week.
JB, any closing remarks from your side?
I was about to say that it's a wonderful insights, Mehmet and Angelica. So this is something which is not available out there in the public. This is only available through real world experience, and I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing all your experience, which is going to help a lot of people who are on the implementation journey. Thank you very much, and it was nice collaborating with you, Jorgen, Karen. Thank you.
Look,
Yeah,
before
you
we
too,
wrap
JB.
up, I also want to say thank you to Angelica because I think it was early March when I reached out to her and I said, I want to break the record for fastest data cloud POC while showing business value because I believed in it. I've been around the space for a long time. And exactly as you said, JB, there hasn't been guidance on how to actually do this. So it has been great to be able to talk about the journey transparently, including what worked well, configuration mistakes we made, how we recovered from it, and still come to the end result. So I hope every one of you who attended today, who's listening afterwards, can feel confident that you too can actually follow these steps in your own environment. And if you are curious, if you are confused, if you want to follow up deep dive, feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you, Mehmet. It was a super interesting journey.
Okay, all. Well, with that, we'll close out the session. Thank you very much. We'll see everybody around. Thank you.
Cheers, folks. That was fantastic. Brilliant.